Before you listen to this story, do one thing for me. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it. I thought the silence of that house would finally calm me. Instead, it taught me how loud fear can be when you're alone. I was in my early 20s, worn down in a way sleep never fixed. Money was tight. My head was louder than any room I'd ever lived in. When I found a cheap rental on the edge of a quiet town, I didn't question it. Old house, small yard, long winters, no neighbors close enough to matter. I told myself solitude would reset me. No roommates, no traffic, no voices but my own. The first night, the cold felt heavier inside than out. The house smelled like dust and old wood. Every sound echoed, but I blamed that on emptiness. I slept with the curtains open, watching snow fall under the streetlight. For the first time in months, my mind slowed. That didn't last. On the third night, I noticed footprints in the snow outside my bedroom window. They were fresh, deep, facing the glass. I stood there longer than I should have, convincing myself they were old. Wind blown, maybe mine from earlier. But I knew where I'd walked. Those prints weren't it. The next night, the lights flickered while I was brushing my teeth. Once, twice, then steady again. Later, just after midnight, I heard movement outside. Slow footsteps crunching snow. Not pacing, circling. I held my breath, listening. They stopped beneath my window. I waited for a knock that never came. Eventually, the cold crept back in, and so did the silence. The following morning, the snow was smooth again. No footprints, like nothing had been there at all. I tried to laugh it off. Old houses, wild imagination. Then I started waking up tired. Not from nightmares, from the feeling that I'd been watched while I slept. One morning, my bedroom curtains were parted slightly, just enough to let in light. I knew I'd closed them. I always did. I told myself it was nothing. But that night, I pinned the fabric together with a clip. When I woke, the clip was on the floor. The curtains were open wider. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. The air in the room felt wrong. Thinner. I stopped sleeping deeply after that. I stayed awake until exhaustion dragged me under. One night, I looked out the window before bed. A figure stood in the backyard, perfectly still, facing me. No features, no movement, just a shape darker than the dark. I shut the curtains and backed away. Didn't look again. I didn't sleep at all that night. The power went out just after midnight. No warning, no flicker. Darkness swallowed the house. My phone showed one bar, then none. I tried calling anyone. Nothing. That's when I heard the knock. Not on the front door. From inside the house. One knock. Soft. Then footsteps. Slow. They stopped outside my bedroom door. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. The door handle shifted. I ran. I don't remember grabbing shoes. I remember the cold biting my feet as I burst outside. Snow burned my skin. My lungs screamed. I didn't look back. I didn't slow down. I ran until lights appeared. Until a road. Until warmth. I never returned for my things. I never spoke to the landlord again. I stayed with a friend until my hands stopped shaking. The police asked questions I couldn't answer. No signs of forced entry. No evidence. I moved on. At least I tried to. Even now, I sleep with every window covered. And when the house gets too quiet, I turn something on. Because silence doesn't feel peaceful anymore. Feels like being watched. I knew my roommate didn't like me. I just never imagined she was quietly trying to erase me. I was in my early 20s, living near campus in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of old carpet cleaner and burnt coffee. I took the room because the rent was cheap and my savings were almost gone. We were strangers matched by a listing and bad timing. She moved in a week before I did, so the place already felt like it belonged to her. She barely spoke to me. When she did, her voice was flat and polite in a way that felt practiced. We passed each other in the kitchen like furniture. I told myself it was fine. I didn't need a friend. I needed a roof. The first few nights were quiet. Too quiet. The building settled with small pops in the walls. The heater clicked on and off, and the hallway light outside our door buzzed softly. Normal apartment sounds. I slept with my door closed and a chair wedged under the handle. More habit than fear. The first red flag was small. I came home from class and my desk lamp was on. I knew I'd turned it off. When I asked her, she looked up from her phone and said, "Why would I touch your stuff?" Her eyes didn't linger. Her tone didn't change. I apologized for asking. Then my things started shifting. My notebook moved from the desk to the bed. My hoodie folded on a chair I never used. Felt petty to care, so I stopped mentioning it. I started doubting myself instead. A week later, my food went missing. Not all of it. Just enough to make me question my memory. I found empty wrappers in the trash that weren't mine. When I brought it up, she laughed softly and said, "You're always forgetting things." She said it like a joke. I laughed too, even though my stomach tightened. The lights were next. I'd wake up to the glow under my door. My room lit when I knew I'd shut everything off. I started checking switches twice, then 3 times. One morning, in the dead of winter, my window was cracked open. Cold air poured in, sharp and metallic. I stood there shivering, staring at the latch. I never opened it. Ever. That night, I pushed my dresser against the door before sleeping. The feeling of being watched crept in slowly. I'd hear the floor creak outside my room after midnight. A pause. Then silence. I told myself it was pipes. Old buildings breathe at night. But I started waking up tired, like I hadn't rested at all. My door would be unlocked in the morning. The chair moved. Sometimes the faint smell of her perfume hung in the air, sweet and heavy, like it didn't belong. I began keeping my phone face down, recording at night. Nothing showed up. That almost made it worse. Friends stopped responding the same way. When I complained, they exchanged looks. One asked if I was getting enough sleep. Another joked about me being stressed. Later, I learned she'd been talking to them, telling them I was forgetful, unstable, that I made things up. I felt myself shrinking, questioning every thought, every memory. The night everything broke, I came home early. Her door was open. Her laptop sat on the table, screen glowing. I wasn't trying to snoop. I just glanced. On the screen were photos of me, taken inside my bedroom, sleeping, different nights, different angles. The timestamp showed early morning hours. My chest went hollow. My hands went numb. I scrolled, shaking, until my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message sent from my number. To her. "Stop touching my things or I'll make you regret it." I hadn't sent it. I hadn't even unlocked my phone. That's when I understood. She had access to everything. My room, my phone, my life. I heard her keys. The door opened. She saw my face. She smiled. Not surprised. Not angry. Just calm. "You shouldn't go through people's things," she said. My heart pounded. My mouth wouldn't work. I backed away. She stepped closer. I grabbed my bag, my charger, my ID. She didn't stop me. She just watched. I left that night. No coat. No plan. The cold hit me like a wall. But it didn't matter. I didn't look back. I didn't go to the police. I didn't try to explain. I knew she'd already written the story. I slept on a friend's couch for weeks, jumping at every sound. I changed my passwords, my number, my routines. I stopped posting online. Even now, I lock my door out of habit. And sometimes, when I wake up in the dark, I wonder how many people believed her before I disappeared. I kept telling myself he was just another stranger on the street. I was wrong. He was never watching the house. He was watching me. I was in my early 20s and living alone for the first time. The house was small, a narrow rental on a quiet residential street that felt almost abandoned in winter. Snow lined the sidewalks in uneven gray piles, and most nights the road was empty by 9. I worked late shifts, which meant I usually came home after dark, when the cold felt sharper and the silence heavier. I liked the independence. I liked unlocking the door and knowing no one else would be inside. The house smelled faintly of old wood and radiator heat. The floors creaked, but in a way that felt familiar, almost comforting. I told myself this was what growing up felt like. The first few nights were uneventful. I followed the same routine: park, unlock, step inside, lock the door behind me. I never lingered outside. I didn't need to. That changed when I noticed him. The first red flag was subtle enough that I almost ignored it. A man stood across the street near the curb, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched against the cold. I assumed he was waiting for someone. People did that sometimes. I nodded politely and went inside. The next night, he was there again. Same spot, same posture. He didn't move when I walked past. He didn't look away either. By the third night, I felt a small knot form in my stomach. Every time I came home, he was there. Sometimes he pretended to smoke, lifting his hand to his mouth even when there was nothing between his fingers. Other times, he just stood still, staring. I started paying attention to details I wished I hadn't noticed. The way his head tilted slightly when I unlocked my door. The way his eyes followed me. Not the house, not the street, just me. I told myself not to overreact. Quiet neighborhoods attract odd routines. I didn't want to be the person who saw danger everywhere. But then his timing started lining up with mine. No matter when I got home, early, late, even once near dawn, he was already there. Felt less like coincidence and more like anticipation. Like he knew when I'd arrive. A week later, he moved closer. Not much. Just a few steps nearer to my side of the street. Enough that the distance felt different. Smaller. More personal. I stopped lingering in my car. I kept my keys threaded between my fingers. I locked the door faster than before and double-checked it every night. One evening, as I brushed my teeth, I glanced toward the front window. The curtains were thin, just enough to let in streetlight. I saw his outline across the road, darker than the shadows around him. He wasn't looking at the house. He was looking at the window, at me. I closed the curtain and leaned my forehead against the glass, heart pounding harder than it should have. My reflection stared back, pale and tense. The next night, I made the mistake of looking again. He was closer than before, still across the street, but positioned directly in line with my living room window. When our eyes met, he smiled. It wasn't wide or exaggerated, just a small lift at the corner of his mouth, like he'd been waiting for me to notice. I stepped back so fast I nearly tripped. That was the night I stopped sleeping well. Every sound outside made my chest tighten. Every passing car felt like a threat that didn't slow down enough. The footsteps came just after midnight. Slow, measured. I froze on the couch, listening. They moved along the porch, wood creaking softly under weight. I held my breath and waited for the knock. It didn't come. Instead, the porch light flicked off. I rushed to the window and twisted the switch. Nothing. When I opened the door a crack, cold air rushed in. The bulb was still warm, but the light had been unscrewed. My phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I stood there shaking as it rang again, vibrating in my hand. That's when a shadow passed the front window. Tall, slow. I backed away, locked the door, grabbed my coat. The footsteps returned. Right outside. I didn't wait. I ran out the back door into the snow, lungs burning, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I drove straight to my parents' house without calling first. I didn't explain much. I didn't need to. They saw my face and let me in. I never went back for my things. I broke the lease through email and blocked the number that kept calling for days afterward. No voicemail was ever left. The house sits empty now as far as I know. I don't drive past it. Even now, when I walk alone at night, I check reflections in windows. Because sometimes it feels like being watched isn't something that ends. It's something you survive. The first gunshot didn't scare me. It was the way they smiled afterward that did. I was a teenager, living with my parents and my younger sibling in a quiet suburban neighborhood where people waved from their driveways and left doors unlocked. It was the kind of place adults called safe without thinking twice. Summers felt endless there. Warm air, cicadas humming, kids outside until the streetlights came on. Most evenings, my sibling and I played in the yard or rode our bikes in slow circles. Our parents liked knowing we were close to home. They trusted the neighborhood. So did we. The house next door belonged to a family that mostly kept to themselves. Their two sons were older than me, late teens maybe, tall and confident in a way that made them seem untouchable. They watched us sometimes, leaning against their fence, but it never felt threatening at first. Just curiosity. At least that's what I told myself. Everything changed one evening when they called out to us and asked if we wanted to hang out by the creek behind the houses. They said they had BB guns. That was how they framed it. Harmless. Something kids messed around with. I hesitated, but my sibling looked excited, and the boys laughed like it was no big deal. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The creek was shaded and quiet, the air damp and smelling of mud and leaves. One of the boys pulled a gun from his backpack. It was heavier than I expected. Black metal, not plastic. My stomach dropped. Before I could say anything, he fired. The sound cracked through the trees, sharp and loud. Birds scattered. My sibling flinched. The boys laughed. Then one of them looked at us, his smile flattening. "Don't tell anyone," he said. Not joking. Not smiling. Something cold settled in my chest. We nodded. We didn't argue. We walked home in silence, the sound of that shot ringing in my ears long after. That was when the fear started following us. At night, flashlights swept across our bedroom walls. Thin beams of light sliding over posters, over our faces, gone before we could react. Sometimes objects appeared on our porch. Empty cans, broken sticks, things that hadn't been there before. Silent reminders that they were watching. I stopped sleeping deeply. Every noise outside felt deliberate. Every laugh from next door sounded like it was meant for us. One afternoon, my sibling came inside pale and quiet. Their hands were shaking. When I asked what was wrong, they opened their palm. A single bullet lay there, cold, heavy. One of the boys had given it to them by the fence. He'd said it had our names on it. I felt sick. I wanted to scream. Instead, I told my sibling to give it to me. I hid it in a drawer and told them not to tell anyone. I don't know why I said that. Fear makes you think staying quiet is safer than speaking up. The harassment grew subtler after that. No more flashlights for a while. Just looks. Lingering stares. A presence that pressed in on us even during the day. Our parents noticed we were quieter, but we said nothing. We were convinced that telling them would make it worse. That the boys would find out. That they'd do something we couldn't take back. I regret that silence more than anything. The night everything broke, it was already dark outside. We were in the living room. The TV was on low. The crash came without warning. Glass exploded inward. A rock bounced across the floor. My sibling screamed. My heart slammed into my ribs. Through the shattered window, I saw movement. A figure across the yard. One of the boys. He stood there holding something long and dark in his hands. A gun. He didn't raise it. He didn't shout. He just stared at us through the broken glass and lifted his free hand, tapping the side of his head slowly, like a reminder. I realized then that walls didn't matter. Locks didn't matter. We weren't safe. Not here. We moved less than a week later. Boxes packed in silence. No explanations given to neighbors. No goodbyes. My parents told people it was for work. For convenience. They never asked us why we looked relieved when we drove away. We never spoke about it again as a family. Not directly. The bullet disappeared. The window was repaired. Life moved on the way it always does. But fear doesn't leave just because you change addresses. Even now, loud noises make my body tense before my mind catches up. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder what would have happened if we'd spoken sooner, or if silence saved us by accident.